Hey, Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams. Happy Friday to you. Welcome into Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger. This is going to be a busy show, and it's one that I've been looking forward to for really the entirety of the week, really for a couple of reasons. The biggest reason of all is coming up in just a few minutes' time. We're going to have Jeff Sintel here live on the program. First time we've talked to Jeff in a couple of weeks, and obviously a perfect time to have a big conversation with Jeff today as we head towards the start of the early signing period a couple of weeks from now. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the segment fairly open-ended. We don't usually do this. Obviously, a perfect time to have Nation Daily presented by Kroger, nor in Jeff's segment on the road, assisted by AAA. We don't normally make room for a lot of comments and questions during Jeff's segment, but today I'm going to try to break with our normal protocol and provide some time for that. There is a lot of individual names that's out there, a lot of rumors involving top prospects. I'll kind of deal with some of this as a preview of what Jeff's going to say here in a moment. But for all of you that have got recruiting questions related to Georgia's 2021 class and also the two big commitments that Georgia's gotten for the class of 2022, we'll give you today a chance to get some of that in. We'll be very kind of on a Friday, sort of free-form, open-ended, give folks a lot of chances to ask questions about all of that. We'll do that with Jeff Sintel here coming up in just a couple of minutes' time. Before that, though, I want to focus in on something that Kirby Smart said this week as a preview to everything we're going to say related to UGA recruiting today. Here's the one thing that we know about this season, that it is unprecedented. And obviously we've seen the way those challenges have played out on the field, just getting games to take place and keeping players healthy and safe, keeping coaches healthy and safe. All of this has been a tremendous challenge, I think, for everyone involved. And yet, for the teams that we care about, Georgia, the rest of the SEC, I think you can also say that the season up to this point in time has been a smashing success. But the fact that it has taken place and the fact that the games themselves have been entertaining and the competition has been legitimate does not obscure the fact that the overall challenge of all of this has just been incredibly difficult. Now, that's been true on the field, something we can see with our own eyes. The challenges related to recruiting in some cases are more invisible because there's a lot of the recruiting process that even in a normal year takes place behind the scenes. But in this particular year, it all takes place behind the scenes. There aren't visits. There aren't the normal courses of action that you see recruits take in order to decide where they want to go play their college football. Programs that want to restock their coffers with talent, programs that want to make sure they are positioned for future success. They've had to navigate some very tricky waters to be able to do that so far for the class of 2021. With that in mind, when Kirby Smart spoke to reporters this week, one of the questions that he was asked about pulling things together for the 2021 class, what still needs to be done here. And Smart, right off the bat in the clip, used a very strong word to describe how all of this is going down this year and really didn't pull any punches with candor in terms of how he sees the situation at the moment. Let me let you hear Kirby Smart on this topic, and it'll set us up for where we need to go today. Here's Kirby.
It's just weird. I feel like we know who we're going to sign up to, 90% or something of our spots. So, that's a given, and you don't, have that concern of, oh, no, he's got 2 more trips left. Oh, no, he's got to go. We got to survive him visiting here and here. So that's not there. But you're still concerned because they can have conversations and change their minds up until signing date. I think my concern would be more just like it is in the past when I don't know what are the most valuable spots we need, because a lot of that is based on juniors and decisions they have. And it's so hard to predict your roster for next year and your needs, not knowing who's going to be here and who's not. That's the hardest thing for me, is figuring out where the pieces of the puzzle come from in terms of who you sign.
So I think that's probably at the end there, definitely true, that for someone like Smart, who's really, I would say, one of the best things that he does as Georgia coach, and one of the things that separates him from a lot of his coaching competition, is his roster management ability. The fact that he always wants as much talent as possible on the Georgia roster at any given time. And that means you're always pushing the limits of the 85 scholarship number or whatever it ends up being, with the opportunity for some seniors to maybe come back. And I think there's a lot of that that's probably still confusing to all of us. But Smart's form of roster management is to kind of push it to the red line, to make sure that you've got as much talent on the roster as possible and all of your various holes are filled, that you've got roster balance as well. And Smart says there at the end that in a year like this, when you don't know what some of these juniors are going to do and some of the other guys on the current roster, the decisions they're going to make, really knowing what you need to fill when it comes to the recruiting process, maybe that's more difficult. And I'm sure that's probably true, but it's not actually that part of the smart statement that's the most interesting to me. It's the word that he uses there at the beginning of, man, this is all just really weird. And as I said before, you can't deny how weird it all is. But I do want to go back to something that I was saying. It's ironic that I'm broadcasting Dog Nation Daily presented by Kroger back from my home again today, because if you go back and think about like March and April, when I think we first started really coming to grips with how weird this was going to be for all aspects of life. I'm not dealing with coronavirus, and in particular, how much it was going to impact college football. The one thing that I said back when I was broadcasting, from home for that long stretch back in the spring, the one thing that I said is that these kinds of stress tests, these kinds of difficulties, I think the end result on this is it's going to make the programs who are kind of on a strong footing, it's going to make them even better. They are going to come out of all of this even stronger because they have the mental wherewithal, the resources and capabilities to handle this, that programs, and I would have included Georgia in a list like this, they probably come out on the other side of this in even better position they were before. And the programs that don't quite have some of the basic fundamentals squared away, maybe they come out of this a little bit worse. And you can make the comparison between, like, say, Georgia and Tennessee. Tennessee is a program that back in the spring seemed like it was going to have a lot of early recruiting momentum, and they might be able to ride that all the way through the rest of the 2021 cycle. But here we are, just a couple of weeks away from the beginning of the early signing period, and all the chatter that existed for Tennessee back in the spring, for the most part, that's completely disappeared now, because while there may be some new, young, fresh energy in the person of Jeremy Pruitt as head coach, the overall foundation of the Tennessee program is very much unmoored. It's very much not yet established, and therefore they're having a hard time holding on to that. And yet Georgia, because of what it has been doing year over year over year, even though 2021, the cycle is completely different than any's ever been before, the fact of the matter is Georgia has processes in place, it would seem anyway, to be able to respond to whatever comes their way. I think you're about to see some evidence of that over the course of the next couple of weeks. There are big names still on the board, and I can't guarantee you, who among them is definitely going to choose Georgia. But if you're a UGA fan, given what the Dogs already have in place for the class of 2021, the fact that Georgia is down to the wire with a guy like Nyland Green, the fact that Georgia seems to be still in the mix for a guy like Mason Smith, possibly still in the mix for a guy like Corey Foreman, however, realistic that shot is, and we'll let Jeff Sentell himself tell us coming up in just a little bit. The fact that Georgia is still very much in it for a guy like Xavier Smith. All of these big names that Georgia's still chasing, the fact that they've been able to do all of this without the benefit of a lot of visits, without the benefit of that great West End Zone facility that houses these recruits on game day and gives them a luxurious and comfortable spot to relax when they come between the hedges. The fact that Georgia's done all of this without that and in a position in the final couple of weeks of before the early signing period to do even more, I think that speaks pretty well to how well that Georgia's done with all of this. Now, just exactly how good is Georgia going to finish? Just exactly how many big names does Georgia add before the close? We will talk about that with Jeff Sentell coming up in just a moment. It is Dog Nation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. My name is Brandon Adams, and I'm happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video or Facebook, YouTube, Twitter for that, radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, or as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DogNation.com. And by the way, speaking of our friends at Kroger, great savings for you. They are here this weekend. You can save over 50% off holiday candy and beauty products at Kroger when you use your card there. Great chance for some savings. Download the digital coupon and save in stores until Saturday. So big savings taking place at Kroger this weekend. Make sure you check that out. As I said before, we will get a ton of recruiting questions answered from our buddy Jeff Sentell here coming up in just a couple of minutes. First time in 2 weeks that Jeff's been with us, so there's a lot of built-up questions to ask. Some of this related to the success that Georgia's enjoyed this week in the class of 2022. A lot of this, though, looking at the big momentum that Georgia looks to finish strong with when it comes to the class of 2021. A lot of that coming up with Jeff Sentell here in a minute. Before that, though, it's Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And I want to go – I don't want to say a completely different direction for a moment, because the truth is it's not a completely different direction. But I do want to go way back in time here just for a moment to start off Around the Doghouse delivered by Marco's Pizza. And listen, I've said this on some of our broadcasts this week. I know I said this on Cover 4 Live last night. I believe I may have said this on Dog Nation Daily at one point in time this week too. I am just very nostalgic. I'm just kind of a sentimental old fool, to be honest with you. I'm always one to go back and think about even like the recent past, scrolling through photographs or, thinking about happy memories. It just, that kind of stuff just sort of always works on me. And so therefore senior day has just kind of always been a big deal to me, because I imagine what it must be like to go through that as a player. Obviously I wasn't, or the family of a player. You can only imagine the overwhelming level of emotion that must exist for the players and their families when they do end their 4-year time at Georgia, given where they, probably the mindset they had once they started all this off. It seems like college is going to last forever. It goes by very quickly. And that kind of thing has always kind of really worked on me. Well, this year's senior class in particular, now there's a lot of seniors, not all of them were part of the class of 2017. But for Georgia, when I think of this year's seniors, I do think primarily of those that signed in the class of 2017. By the way, some of those may even come back next year. We don't know. There's a lot of weirdness related to all of this. But in thinking about where Georgia stands today, as some of these guys will get ready to play their final game between the hedges against Vanderbilt on Saturday, I think it's also important to think about where all of this started. And one thing I've said before is that when you think about the early history of Kirby Smart, I don't think you can overstate just how crucial the 2017 class was to all of that because of when it happened. And it's easy to look back on this now and say that it was always, guaranteed and destined that Kirby Smart was going to have the success that he's enjoyed at Georgia. He's been to the playoff. He's won the SEC, won the East a number of years, been a fixture in New Year's Six Bowls, hasn't yet won the national championship. There's been a lot of success. And it's easy to imagine that was always going to occur. But there were moments in the 2016 season when that wasn't quite, it didn't feel as much like a guarantee, right? Georgia lost to Vanderbilt. Georgia lost to Georgia Tech. Georgia lost some games that would leave some UGA fans wondering, wow, is there buyer's remorse with the fact that Mark Richt isn't here anymore? And that's just, let's face it, if you go back to 2016, there was some of that in the air in and around Athens at the time. And yet recruits, for the most part, were immune to that negativity. When the 2016 season concluded, immediately the work began to allow the 2017 class and the guys that would come in and be a part of that transform everything related to Georgia football. And I think it stands as a truly special moment for the Smart era because of how many freshmen contributed to that SEC championship team in 2017 and how much the guys who paved the way and made decisions to come to Georgia back in a time in which it wasn't, quite as fashionable to do that then as it is now. The recruiting success that Georgia's about to enjoy for its 2021 class was in many ways set up by what happened in 2017. So I want to go way back in time to National Signing Day in 2017 for a moment. And Smart was asked a question in particular about all the in-state guys, elite prospects from the state of Georgia that chose to stay home. For years and years and years, those players have been going to Alabama, or they've been going to Florida State, or they've been going to, Auburn, wherever you want to mention here, for years and years and years. That's where those guys had been going. But Smart, with the way that he put together that 2017 class that ranked number 3 in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite for that cycle, said, essentially with his own words, that there's a new decision in the mix now. And all of a sudden, these guys who grow up in towns where all the folks cheer for Georgia, now those folks are going to stay and they're going to go to UGA and be a part of what we're building here. Let's go back in time to 2017 and hear Kirby Smart on that.
I think the opportunity that the young men in this state have to come to the University of Georgia, play for the state university, and I think, Thomas Davis has said it best many times, why go anywhere else? You got a chance to play for your state university and get a great education, one of the best educations in the country, and come here and do it at a special place that the people in your town root for most of the time.
I love that from Kirby Smart. I love going back in time to that and hearing the pitch he was making then. And you think about some of the seniors now who were incoming freshmen then who agreed to be a part of that early build for Georgia. Now they stand with the Vanderbilt game on Saturday, the Missouri game presumably after that. We should find out more about that today. The bowl game after that to be the winningest senior class in Georgia football history. It is a great legacy. I do think it matters. And after hearing Kirby Smart talk about these guys 4 years ago, this is Kirby talking about that same group here just this week. Take a listen to this.
Just think it's something that keeps you motivated. If that's something that motivates you, legacy is important. That means something. Certainly been a lot of great senior classes. And if this year had been a more traditional year with the extra games, this group probably could have shattered it. They could have beat it in by 2 or 3. But with only the 10 games and the possibility of a bowl game, they've got to win out to put themselves in that position. I know that it matters to a lot of them.
So listen, I've been a Georgia fan my whole life, and I have pretty much lived my entire life without seeing Georgia win a national championship. I'm too young to remember. Believe it or not, there's actually something I'm too young to remember. I'm too young to remember Georgia winning a national championship in 1980. And I crave a national championship as much as any Georgia fan who's watching or listening today. I clearly do. But I don't think the lack of a national championship tarnishes these Georgia seniors, whether they came in for the class of 2017, came in some other time after that, or holdovers, a couple of still remaining from the class of 2016. I don't view that as a tarnish on their legacy whatsoever. This is a group that's done a lot of very admirable things in a Georgia uniform. And when Georgia eventually does win a national championship, and I do believe at some point in time that will occur, when Georgia does win a national championship, I continue to believe that the legacy established by these guys who may play their last game and the foundation they've built over the course of these last 4 years will be a big part of the reason why. It's Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza. It's America's most beloved pizza because it's real, authentic pizza made the Italian way. And I love recommending Marco's Pizza on here because one of the things that I know is if you've got family like mine, you want good food, but you also want it at a great price. That's what Marco's Pizza can provide for you. They got all kinds of great deals, including you can get a large one-topping pizza and 10 chicken wings right now, or dippers. That's just $17.99. It's a Dog Nation game day favorite. You're settling in to watch some football this weekend. Choose Marco's Pizza to go along with that. Marco's app, marcos.com. Take advantage of those great savings. And it's great to have Marco's Pizza delivering Around the Doghouse to us here today. All right, before we're done on today's show, I am going to look a little bit more deeply at Georgia on the field against Vanderbilt on Saturday, and in particular, the one thing that's been a hot topic around Dog Nation this week, the need for Georgia to make sure that it upgrades that offense and continues to display the improvement that I believe it's shown over the course of the last couple of weeks. We'll let you hear Smart in his own words about that coming up a little bit later on. Before that, though, time now for Around the Doghouse. Time now for On the Road, assisted by AAA. And as I look on my screen in front of me, Jeff Sintel, authentic here, is on the road, assisted by AAA today, as he covers the recruiting trail for the Georgia Bulldogs here, coming towards the close of the 2021 recruiting class. Jeff, happy Friday to you. It's really nice to have you here as part of the program. Have not gotten to talk to you in a little while, but man, there is a lot to talk about today, and I can't wait to do all of it. Jeff, you may be muted here. We're not hearing you. Let's see if we can get you going here now.
Hey, Brandon. Hey, man. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. How's everybody around Dog Nation today?
I think we're all getting excited about the conclusion to the 2021 recruiting cycle. It certainly seems like there's a lot of fun stuff going with that right now, and I'm sure you're kind of seeing the same kind of stuff here.
I think if I was prop appropriate, Brandon, would you have preferred me drinking orange juice in a mason jar right now? Is that what you would have preferred me doing right now?
Listen, I love the idea of that. I'm all about plays on words, even if it's a Mason with 2 A's. And, I guess, Jeff, let's kind of dive into some of this here right now because there's all kinds of conflicting stuff that's out there. You can speak about Mason Smith in particular here, which is, I know, one of the names that's probably most prominent on so many of our listeners and viewers, minds here. The notion that, well, those LSU ties still run deep, but hey, Georgia's still very much in the mix and a part of this. That's what the online chatter would suggest. So let me start with a guy like Mason Smith. How real is the potential pull for a guy like Smith to Georgia, or does the in-state school eventually win out here, LSU? I mean, the way that I think many of us thought would be a pretty prominent player in all of this.
Well, this is the time of the year, Brandon, when we all say it's okay to believe. And I think it's okay to believe right now that Georgia has a really good shot at Mason Smith. Brandon, this is such a different recruiting cycle. Normally, when guys talk about, I want to play with another dude, I want to play with this guy, we're playing together. Really, when reality hits the road about 2 or 3 months before these decisions, everybody just makes their own decision, which is best for them. But this year, man, it's different. There's so little attachments and tether points and anchor points between these top players and these schools because of the coronavirus and the pandemic restrictions on campus face-to-face visits, that all of a sudden I want to go there and it will be fun there because I will play with that guy. All of a sudden that really becomes something much more tangible than in the years past. If you think Mason Smith, who had a low-key visit about 2 weeks ago for the Mississippi State game, that was on the hush, hush, hush. And then you hear other reports about how Corey Foreman and Mason Smith were expected to be back in LSU this weekend. Those visits are also reportedly canceled. I think Smith and Foreman are just huge mammoth fish for Georgia. Remember, they were in the back of that truck bed with Amarius Mims. They were in the back of that truck bed with Brock Vandegrift, Lavassier Carroll. Let's not forget Xavier Smith and also Terry and Arnold. I think the entanglements and the connections and the links between these guys, including coaching staff continuity, you see in a lot of places where schools like Tennessee, South Carolina, some of their programs, and even LSU to some extent with all the chatter around Bo Pelini, some of their programs and the continuity of their staffs are not appearing robust and strong around this type of year. And I think, going back to the mason jar question, Brandon, I think Mr. Smith has always articulated it to me that he's a guy that's not going to do what everybody expects him to do. He's going to do his own thing.
Told folks I'd take some comments and questions for you today, just because we're kind of wide and open-ended as we head towards the early signing period. Lil Wayne Carter on YouTube asking about Corey Foreman. And the sense that I get from Foreman, as you said before, I know there's been chatter that the trip he was supposed to take to Baton Rouge is not going to happen, but I guess there has been some fear that maybe Clemson's kind of gotten back involved, the school that Foreman was once committed to, and maybe USC still looms the possibility there. How real do you view both of those issues for Foreman right now, that the in-state pull of USC, even in a year without football there in California, at least, delayed football heavily for the Pac-12, and in the case of Clemson, maybe kind of getting back involved at the right time for Foreman? How real do you view all of that?
Yeah, so to me, it appears with Foreman that, with USC, I don't know if I consider them a contender. I think it still would be like in the Georgia, LSU, Clemson type vernacular there. Reminder with Smith doesn't have an offer for Clemson. And I think, Corey has now went back and forth in his published interviews, and Corey, after saying he would not know or he would not decide, now he's kind of settled on what he's going to do is he's going to make his decision privately. He's going to sign on the 16th. And then the All-American Bowl is still going to have a ceremony where they're going to have an hour-long special of guys revealing their decision, kind of like always. And Corey Foreman is slated to be a part of that broadcast as well. But Mason Smith's decision will come much earlier than that, on December the 16th. Brennan, you want to know us about something to really feel great about?
Sure.
Watch Georgia. If Georgia gets some secret visitors, and these are some of the names on everybody's watch list, if they show up for a ho-hum Vanderbilt game this weekend, I mean, good gosh almighty Joe Friday, that would certainly be some great news for Dog Nation.
Who are some names to look out for there?
You could see, Terry and Arnold keeps telling me that he's trying to make a late visit before he's going to wait until February the 3rd for his decision. But he's now in basketball season, Brandon. Arnold's trying to make it. Mason Smith certainly has the ability to come back. And you start wondering, well, if Foreman and Smith are not at LSU this weekend, are they anywhere this weekend?
Yeah.
What's the most likely next school? Now, we do know that Mason Smith really loves Alabama. That was the school he grew up kind of pulling for, rooting for, had the gear. But I've always thought with Mason Smith, how, let's face it, his family, I think his mom is a doctor. And then who he's also expressed to me that his mom has had some thoughts about relocating to the Atlanta area. And then his father.
A lot of hospitals here. Hey, listen, if she's a doctor, you got a lot of hospitals around here. It's a big medical community.
Definitely so. And then maybe a potential sponsor, Brandon, that would be great. But and then his father, he has his own consulting firm that works in the oil industry, the oil field, and the oil rig industry. Now, why is Jeff saying this on a Friday morning behind his steering wheel while he's on the road? Well, this is a family that doesn't need to stay in state, whatever happens with Mason Smith's career in terms of does he go be $1 million a year, $5-10 million a year player in the NFL? There's not that feeling that, he needs to stay in state. to provide for a future post-football necessarily. Again, one of the things that's fascinating to me, Brandon, is all the things that makes it so hard to leave the state of Louisiana. Playing in Tiger Stadium, Death Valley at night, the raucous fans, being around those coaches, being around those commits on multiple visits in the facilities and the offices. That's always worked against LSU here, where it's kind of created an opening for the Bulldogs and other schools to try and get Mason Smith out of the state.
That's one of the things that Kadarian Jones brings up in our Dog Nation Facebook page is the fact that this is not a great year for LSU. Jeff, you may or may not be aware, they're, according to ESPN, the biggest underdog for defending national champion in at least 40 years. They play against Alabama on Saturday. We just seen that the momentum from being defending national champions has, for the most part, completely disappeared from Baton Rouge. Does that hurt them in the Mason Smith recruitment, the fact that they have just not held on to that prestige very well?
Well, he's articulated it, and Mason Smith has said that he feels the same way about LSU as he always has, even when they were winning by 30. He realizes the triage there about guys opting out, players opting out, the guys necessary for a rebuild. But I think the big thing with Georgia they needed to do, and it's funny how the back half of the schedule has done this. Brandon, I think it could create a false positive for the on-field, actually how good Georgia is if they were to rip through Mississippi State, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Missouri, and, put up some numbers, look like they're having fun doing it. Also a lot of havoc. But what it needs to happen is Georgia needs to look like they're having fun. They're flying around the ball. They're putting the savage pads on. It looks like it's fun to be a Georgia Bulldog, where, Brandon, if we're being honest, at the first part of this year, those were some very tough games. Georgia was placed in a very tough situation at the quarterback spot. I think you've mentioned it on this program from time to time.
Yeah,
but that's
come up before.
That looked more like a grind. It looked like one more of those beautiful lights behind you on Mrs. Adams, Firebook, Storybook, chestnuts roasting by the Adams fire, vista behind you. It looked like those lights weren't twinkling as bright, or it looked like those lights weren't the LED red lights behind you. Waiting for you to find some red lights and put them behind you on your post-game show.
Yeah, there you go for that. By the way, Tavedas Taylor wants to talk about Nyland Green. We'll do that coming up in just a moment. Let me remind you, it's on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sintel here today. And, of course, when you think about AAA, you think about legendary roadside assistance, which does matter when Jeff's traveling around to visit recruits and cover high school football games and all the things that go on this time of year. But there's also something else you should think about when you think about AAA. They want to take care of you when it comes to life insurance. Let's face it, if you're responsible for taking care of a family, life insurance is an important step in that process to make sure they are all taken care of and covered, those who are in your care, as well as they can possibly be. And AAA's got some great options for you when it comes to life insurance. Now, if you want to find out more about this, and you should, there are 3 different ways I want you to be able to get in touch. You can give them a call. That's 866-695-0222. That's 866-695-0222. Or you can stop by a AAA office and talk to someone in person right there. You can also check them out on the web, AAA.com/life. That's AAA.com/life. And you can learn a lot more about that. So Tavedas wants to know about Nyland Green. Green's one of those guys who's been pretty outspoken on social media as of late, even making a big, very noticeable mention of Mason Smith the other day. But Jeff, it's also true that, for someone like me who's always trying to listen in on online chatter, once again, Clemson, that was seemingly a factor with Green months ago, has maybe now emerged as of late. It seems like you're hearing very little about Tennessee at the moment, more about Clemson. How real is that? And, obviously, Clemson's a pretty good closer on signing day. If it is the Tigers, that's the kind of school that will make Georgia fans a little more anxious about that recruitment. What can you tell us right now about the defensive back, Nyland Green?
Yeah, so it's well documented and well stated on all our programs that Georgia, we should say that the most likely scenario is no more Mark Webb, no more Richard LeCount. Same thing for Tyson Campbell, same thing for Eric Stokes, same thing for DJ Daniel. That's why Nyland Green is really attractive to Georgia and vice versa, because, he's a guy, great ball skills, big guy. Brandon, he announced this week finally that he's making his decision in just 4 days. Nyland Green will make his decision on December the 8th. The last communication I had with him the other day, he said they're not certain yet about whether he and his family want to do a ceremony at the school. We'll stand by and wait on that. But Nyland is a guy, man, he's another one of those things where Georgia, where 24/7 Sports, Brandon, has him rated as the number 2 overall cornerback prospect. Some guys look at him and see star, see safety. Nyland wants to be a cornerback. That's where Georgia and Clemson are recruiting him as a play corner. He'd be a big corner, Brandon, about 6'3", 195 pounds. He likes to get a handful of Skittles before every game, maybe during games. He brings that Chucky doll. Brandon, we've got you well up to speed now on Chucky doll vernacular.
Sure.
Not just Gators, not just Auburn Tigers. Wouldn't it be funny if he put a Georgia hat or whatever hat he would choose on the head of the Chucky doll in his ceremony, if he has a ceremony on Tuesday? Man, I just think he's vital. I think this is one of those things, Brandon, where you have to kind of hunker down a little bit on Nyland Green, because that's the school. If he chooses Clemson, everybody's going to go, yeah, Clemson, we get it. Even with those departures from Georgia's defensive backfield, the one particular piece of online chatter I hope you saw, because it might have gotten a semi-chortle out of you, Brandon, did you see the tweet where it was a Rivals proclamation about Mason Smith as the new number one player in the country? Nyland quote tweets that sucker, and he says, I wouldn't mind playing with that guy.
I wouldn't mind that either, because obviously we know Mason Smith's not connected to Clemson at all. So if you want to start putting those pieces together, obviously a little easier to imagine that taking place at Georgia more so than maybe anywhere else. And, one more on Green here. If you want to go back to when we first started talking about him, heavily months and months ago, as I said before, at the time then, it seemed like Clemson was a pretty strong, potential contender for services. But for a number of months, Georgia seems to have been kind of right there, ever present in this recruitment. Does the length of time that Georgia has been in on Green, and even in a year like this where you're not taking normal visits, things like that, does the depth of this relationship potentially give Georgia any kind of advantage?
It's the hometown thing. There's the connection there with Eric Stokes from the same community. I think the way that Nyland Green has spoken about Georgia for the last 6-7 months, I think it's really genuine. He's a smiling kid. He always has a big smile on his face. But for me, when I listen to Nyland Green, he brings up how much him and Charlton Warren always talk about shoes. There's a genuine connection here. I mean, Brendan, this is the time of year, and I'm not just festive by watching your screen and looking at the chestnuts roasting. This is the time of year where Kirby Smart is like that friend we play golf with that always gets the perfect gift for his wife on Christmas, or that family member when you're at grandma's house, and they always get that thing that makes someone cry, that special present for like the anchor grandparents we all grew up around. Kirby Smart's kind of like this with the Georgia faithful. Kirby Smart always gets early signing day exactly right, national signing day exactly right. He doesn't leave this fan base disappointed. And I'll tell you, Brandon, it's kind of simple Tetris. If Georgia gets the Mason Smith piece to fall, I mean, it makes the rest of that truck bed picture a heck of a lot more easier. Xavier Story Jr. connected to Terry and Arnold. That's what everybody should be looking for, those big anchor pieces that could join this class.
That's a really interesting point. And we've talked a lot about Smith. I don't want to get, too lost back in this again. But when we think about those kind of anchor recruits in the past, there were guys that had big personalities. MJ Sherman, Kendall Milton, obviously go back years, Richard LeCount. These were guys that had that magnetism that drew people together. I know Smith's got a personal relationship with a lot of these guys, but I don't know a ton about his personality. Is he one of those MJ Sherman, Kendall Milton style guys that seems to have the big personality, friendly, popular, things like that? Is that kind of how you would describe Mason Smith?
I think Mason is a very articulate, kind of like Mikhail Sherman was as well. They're very comfortable in their own skin. They're very advanced in their thinking and the way they feel. They're not impressionable. Look at Corey Foreman, for instance. I think if Foreman visited Alaska Tech or BYU this weekend, he would come out of that thinking, man, what about those Cougars? They're amazing.
That's where I want to go to school.
Coastal Carolina. With Mason's been a guy that's very it's almost like a chess player, or simply put, he always comes across to me as a guy that knows what he wants to say, knows what he doesn't want to say. And then also you got to remember, it's almost like he's surgical with his comments, kind of the way you think about his mother and her background as a physician.
So a couple things I want to get to before we're done. I know you got some reporting coming up on Jimmy Horn Jr. at DogNation.com. Horn's a wide receiver. I love the story from him at the Orlando Sentinel where he really raved over getting a Georgia offer. This is a guy that is only just now on my radar. I'd never heard of him probably until 24 hours ago, something along those lines. But I'll let you tell us about him as a player. But I just love reading how excited he and his family were to get that Georgia offer. And Jeff, obviously, just given the discussion that's ongoing with the Georgia passing game, a receiver offer this late in the process will certainly get some attention and draw some interest. So tell us a little bit about Jimmy Horn Jr., a guy that has earned some attention from Georgia here very late, it would seem, in the process.
So lean in, my friends. If we want to go with on the road, this is when you kick that sports car, whatever you're driving, into sport mode. Because when I watch Jimmy Horn Jr. run the football, carry the football on film, Brandon, he looks as fast as anybody Georgia has ever recruited. This is what you have to like if you're a Georgia fan about this late, I'm calling it a late, not a late bloomer, but a late burner for Georgia, is Georgia looked at its recruiting room. It looked at its recruiting board, saw it had some of those more, I want to say, stocky, 6'2", 195-pound all-around receivers coming in a pair of 3-stars that Georgia found. And they look for more explosivity. I'm going to use that word very loosely because Georgia wants to do more, wants to be more fun in the passing game. And Brandon, when you watch Jimmy Horn Jr. run, just leaving dudes in Florida, 8A high school football, that's the fastest of the fast in the state of Florida. He's making these highlights, and he's got he comes back to the sidelines and tells his coaches, he's like, man, coach, I didn't even reach top speed there. I have another gear beyond that. Man, he looks really fast. You see him in Wildcat. You see him in kick return, punt return. Brandon, I'm going to wind you back to Mario Williams. Remember that guy maybe last January, February, he wound up at Oklahoma, but that quick wide receiver that could get open anywhere. That's what Jimmy Horn Jr. brings. And, what the story we're going to put up on dognation.com today will convey about Jimmy Horn is Georgia definitely got in the game there strong because they showed that they believed in him, not taking a risk, but they believed in him by being the first big school to offer. What I love about story time this time of year, Brandon, remember Corey Wren a year ago with Florida State? He ends up at Florida State, but Georgia was trying to bring that electric type 5'9", 175-pound water bug nobody could keep up with. Well, Jimmy Horn Jr. picked up Florida Atlantic and South Florida and Georgia this week. Those were the big offers. I've been told Penn State is now coming in. UCF is now coming in. But before that, Brennan, he had Florida Methodist. He had Central Arkansas. Those were the schools that were looking at Jimmy Horn Jr. before this week. And you're right, Brennan. I didn't even know about this guy until maybe 2 days ago, two and a half days ago, because you saw what he brought to the table. You see that film, Brandon. There's about 12 minutes of high school film where he's just running away from dudes, man. And I think that's what Georgia needs, is a guy who puts a foot in the ground and goes and just runs away with guys. Georgia, after watching Alabama have a Jalen Waddle, having a Henry Ruggs all these years, Georgia has needed to find a guy like that just looks like, going back to the old days of covering recruiting, when you saw those tapes, you saw those CDs, and you're like, is this guy sped up? Is my clicker stuck into the remote control? The only way you could do that back in the day is you would have to look at the sidelines and look for the cheerleaders jumping up and down and doing cartwheels like they were on Red Bull before anybody knew what Red Bull was. That's how you could tell you had some doctored tape right there. When you watch Jimmy Horn Jr., and those highlights are going to be plastered all over dognation.com today, you think, does Georgia have anybody this fast right now? For me, on the field right now playing, the answer is no. Darius Smith is fast, but I think Jimmy Horn Jr. is just as fast.
All right, very quickly, 2 names I want to mention before we go here. What can you tell us about the latest on Xavier Smith? I know he's released his final group of finalists, and it's probably what we would expect with Alabama and Florida in the mix there with Georgia. What is the latest on Sorey?
Sorey's going to make his decision on December the 16th at his high school, Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. Brendan, I know you'd like another head-to-head with Florida, at least on the recruiting trail for the rest of this 2021 cycle. He's going to make his decision from his old high school in Graceville High School in Florida. Terry and Arnold, my friend, has told me that he plans to be there for his buddy on his decision day as well. I've always felt, Brandon, I've always felt that Georgia was in a very, very good spot for a long time with Xavier Smith, man. And that goes back to January, February when visits are still allowed. It boggles my mind, this recruiting cycle, Brandon, because you have guys leaning on how they felt back in January and February. It's almost like you meet the girl of your dreams, you go out on a few dates, you date for about 6 months consistently. Then all of a sudden, a life event, whether it's a military deployment, whether it's a job where you don't see each other face to face except on FaceTime or calls for 8-9 months, and then while it's away, you decide to get married, you propose, and all that. That's how hard this is for these young men making these decisions. Sure, they can step into Athens or Tuscaloosa or Norman, Oklahoma, and walk around campus. They can do it with other potential commitments in the class, but they've got to figure this out largely on their own. And for some, it is very much a leap of faith. But Georgia, and in the case of one Xavier Smith Jr. here, was already in a very good spot with Xavier before the pandemic wall came down.
All right, quickly before we're done, obviously a lot there in the class of 2021, but Georgia also did some great work this week when it comes to the class of 2022, commitments on back-to-back days. Can you give us a thumbnail sketch of exactly what Georgia has added, included what sounds like the next really big get for Trey Scott there as defensive line coach? What did Georgia do this week for its 2022 class?
Yeah, let me throw a quick shout out to Trey Scott, the guy that somebody wondered was ever going to be the guy recruiting wise, position group wise for Georgia. Trey Scott landing Tyree West. Brendan, this is very simple. Just imagine Jalen Carter. Just imagine Trayvon Walker. Georgia has secured its big time top 5 defensive tackle already for the 2022 class. He is a DSGB, as Pastor Troy would love to say about players from down south in South Georgia. That's how important Trey Scott's get here was for Tyree West. I think, Brandon, he's one of the top 5 guys in the class, no matter what happens over the next months and months until that cycle closes. Very big get. Man, if Trey Scott, with the help of Scott Cochran and basically the entire staff, can lock down Mason Smith this year, I think it elevates Trey Scott into that Sam Pittman ace recruiter role for Georgia. Big get Tyree West. Also very big get Darius Smith out of Appling County. Brandon, 6'6". You want to hear some juice on Darius Smith? Last week he had 3 sacks in a playoff game. He runs track for Appling County. He's the center for the basketball team. And Brandon, when I mean running track, he's not throwing the javelin. He's running the distance. He's running the 400. He's running the 800. He's running the 200. He's running the relays. 6'6", about 231 pounds. Brandon, when that guy comes out of Georgia, he's going to be 6'6", about 265, and looking very much like an NFL first-round draft pick.
Jeff, just really outstanding stuff. Thank you so much for being on the road with us, assisted by AAA today. I certainly appreciate all the insight you give us here in the 2021 class for Georgia. I know you've got a lot more coming at dognation.com. You've also been busy in the forum as well at forum.dognation.com. This is a great time of year. Looks like Georgia's heading towards another fun conclusion, and we'll find out specifically who joins this class in the days to come. But I certainly appreciate your insight on all of that today.
Yeah, Brandon. Second round of the Georgia high school playoffs, by the way. Brock Vandegrift's playing Darlington. You've got Chaz Chambliss Carrollton playing Sprayberry. Then you got West Forsyth, the man-child, Dylan Fairchild, taking on North Gwinnett, and Clemson commit Barrett Carter in that game as well. This is the time of year for high school football in the state of Georgia.
And I think West Forsyth and North Gwinnett's also on TV tonight as well, isn't it? I think.
That's correct. It's on. Brandon, can I say a fruit product TV? Can I say something that the Peachtree TV? We're going to throw that one out there because my good friend Rusty Manziel's on the call tonight.
I never heard of him. I'm just kidding. I guess we'll give that away to him for free there, but we'll look forward to watching some high school football in Georgia here this weekend and having a good time with all of that. Jeff, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate that. Enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you again very soon.
Take it easy, buddy. Everybody have a good day at Vandy.
Good stuff there from Jeff Sintel on the road, assisted by AAA. A lot of recruiting information. Really appreciate all of that. Very fascinating stuff. Also, time now to kind of transition back to our SEC through here. And as we do that, I'll remind you, speaking of going to Athens for the Vanderbilt game on Saturday. Some of you planning on doing that. Some of you, though, can't be in Athens. You wish you could be. My information for you, though, is that you can bring Athens to you, even if you can't be there yourself. Of course, I'm talking about the great, great flavor of Classic City Lager from our friends at Creature Comfort Brewing Company. It's an Athens original, but you don't have to be in Athens to get it. 6 and 12-pack cans. It's available at whatever retailer you shop at. So when you're getting stocked up for your game day party, get some Classic City Lager there in the shopping cart to go along with that. It's a lager-style beer, which means it's lighter tasting, but there's no sacrifice from flavor. It's crisp and great flavor. It's just good cold beer. In fact, that's what Classic City Lager wants to be known as, good cold beer. So make sure you check out some today. All right, let me roll through a few SEC through type stories here. First of all, Alabama coach Nick Saban is going to be back on the sidelines in his old stomping grounds of Baton Rouge on Saturday. His coronavirus situation has cleared up. He will be there. As I mentioned to Jeff and told you on the show yesterday, LSU really an unprecedented underdog in this game, more than 4 touchdowns. And it all kind of remains to be seen of just how long of a memory Alabama has and how badly they want to beat up on LSU. Do they want to send a message? There is a sense in which right now Alabama can't even seemingly avoid blowout games because of just other level they're playing on right now. They did that last week without Nick Saban. And as I've said before, I really feel like, with no disrespect intended towards Saban, but I really feel like the coach they can least do without right now is no longer Saban. Most important coach on the Alabama coaching staff is Steve Sarkisian, the guy that makes the offensive system hum. And you saw that last week, that he's just clicking on all cylinders with that offense. The need to replace Tua Tagovailoa, the need to replace Jerry Jeudy, and now the injured Jalen Waddle, and of course Henry Ruggs from last year's draft class. They just haven't skipped a beat. I don't like giving Alabama credit, but in this case you must. I have no reason to believe, Saban there or not, LSU can do anything to slow them down this upcoming Saturday. Interesting rumors, and y'all know how much I love coaching rumors. It's my favorite thing, and it always has been. Some very juicy, interesting rumors kind of popping up here related to Urban Meyer at Texas. Now, a lot of these things have a way of almost being too good to be true and too salacious to ever happen. Think about the groomers phase of John Gruden to Tennessee, just too bold and salacious to actually take place. Or years ago, the notion that Nick Saban might go to the Texas job. I don't know that that was ever quite as serious as it was portrayed to be at the time in the media. Maybe the Urban Meyer to Texas rumors are a little more significant, first of all, because a respected outlet's talking about it, Football Scoop, who's kind of always been good at the coaching search stuff. They're mentioning the possibility of Urban Meyer to Texas and the specific details that might be involved in that. But maybe even more significant, the fact that publicly Texas won't really commit to bringing back Tom Herman for the upcoming year, that they're supposed to be looking into all their options. And that's kind of like not just a back channel quote, but kind of official statement that Texas is looking to see what's out there and available to them. So from a public standpoint, they won't commit to making Tom Herman come back, which means that if Texas does have a chance to look for a coach, they're obviously going to shoot as high up the food chain as they possibly can. And no coach that could be hired would have more ability to generate attention than Urban Meyer potentially would. So this may be a story worth watching. I don't know that it actually ends up happening. Meyer may just like being flirted with, and ultimately he's maybe done with that part of his life. But this is probably one of those stories that's going to be talked about a whole lot more, the potential of Urban Meyer to Texas. There was some interesting recruiting news in the state of Georgia here this week as Jay Garcia. You'll remember him as the former USC commit who moved from California, was at Valdosta. Then after an ESPN.com story, the GHSA stepped in and took away his eligibility down there at Valdosta. Then Garcia transferred to Grayson. And now Garcia has decommitted from USC. Sounds like on the basis of some of the, once again, online chatter here, Miami's going to try to get involved on this. Sounds like Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss could be a factor in this too. But Garcia has been one of the big stories this year because he was among the first and maybe the most high-profile guy to leave from out west where there was no high school football, come down south where he could play. And now as a byproduct of doing that, he's also decommitted from USC. So Garcia back here on the open market. As far as the weekend to come for the SEC, I'm really interested in what's going to take place here. Jeremy Pruitt, we told you yesterday about the trolling calls on his radio show, the growing dissatisfaction with him in Knoxville. I don't believe that Tennessee can keep it all that close against Florida on Saturday, but doing something to show yourself playing with some level of pride, some level of acumen. If it's another blowout loss for Tennessee, this time against Florida, that could be a real problem for Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee. Now, are the Vols in a position to do anything about that right now? I'm not quite so sure. And my advice would be, unless you can hire Hugh Freeze, who I do think is essentially a home run hire because of the success that he had when he was an SEC coach. If you can't hire Hugh Freeze, then I would say that the next best option for Tennessee probably remains Jeremy Pruitt. I don't know that Vols fans particularly like hearing that, but I believe that's probably true. I still think that Pruitt's a pretty good coaching prospect. I think the rebuild situation at Tennessee was more difficult than maybe some want to give credit for. And I think too many people put too much stock in the success that the Vols had at the end of last season. But look at who Tennessee beat. It's South Carolina, they fired their coach now. It's Missouri, they fired their coach. You look Vanderbilt, they fired their coach. You look at all of these teams that Tennessee beat at the end of the 2019 season. For the most part, at least in the SEC slate, those were programs that eventually moved on from their coach. So you question the validity of those wins. I will say, I think one of the things that you can watch for from Vanderbilt on Saturday against Georgia, we'll get more into the Georgia-Vanderbilt game coming up in just a moment. But I think one of the things that Vanderbilt probably feels like is that the Tennessee game for them next Saturday is actually a winnable game because of how bad Tennessee is. And this is one thing I've been telling, Georgia fans, this week, that you saw Vanderbilt last week lose to Missouri 41-0, fewer than 200 yards of total offense. But that's really an outlier for Vanderbilt. They play with no level of focus, maybe no level of motivation last Saturday against Missouri for maybe a number of reasons. But prior to that, Vanderbilt had actually covered 3 straight games in comparison to the Vegas point spread. So you almost wonder, it's weird to say that there might be a look-ahead factor for Vanderbilt, but you almost wonder if Vanderbilt wants to be careful against Georgia, not get anybody hurt or anything like that, to preserve their chance to maybe get a win to close out the season against Tennessee. There had been some chatter about that in the national media this week, the Vanderbilt media this week. So maybe keep your eye on that. One more game I'll mention. I think Auburn and Texas A&M is also really fun too. A&M needs to perform big on the road. Auburn's covered 10 of 12. Its last 12 there at Jordan-Hare Stadium. They are typically a pretty live home dog and pretty tough to beat all the way around when it comes to Jordan-Hare Stadium. So watch closely for A&M Auburn on Saturday. Really, I think that's probably a pretty good game. I'm actually fairly excited about the SEC slate overall. Also a little bit curious about the Big Ten slate too. Indiana without Michael Penix against Wisconsin. Wisconsin trying to validate itself as a potential opponent for Ohio State if Ohio State can't make the conference championship game. Big Ten, maybe they're contemplating changing their rules so it's easier for Ohio State to kind of get in there on that slot. A lot of stuff worth watching, and Ohio State has a chance to try to impress on Saturday, too, against Michigan State. So pretty busy weekend of football there, and we'll make all of that your SEC through. Let me also, before I get back to Georgia Vanderbilt all the way around here, give you a quick mention of my friends at MyBookie. It's winning season at MyBookie. That means making bets on football. But they also have a full working casino and everything like that, too. So there's a lot of gaming options for you when you get involved with my friends at MyBookie. And also when you sign up for the first time, they're going to give you a big deposit bonus. They're going to give you half back of what you put in. That means if you put in $200, MyBookie is going to bonus your account $100 when you first sign up. But in order to take advantage of that big first deposit bonus, you have got to use the promo code DAWGNATION. It's all one word, DAWG. Here's how it works. Just simply find MyBookie online. Just type it into your browser. Use the promo code DAWGNATION. You make your bets. After that, you play, you win, you get paid, and you get a big first deposit bonus when you sign up using the promo code DAWGNATION with MyBookie. Speaking of point spreads, Georgia, more than a 5-touchdown favorite against Vanderbilt on Saturday. And for a Georgia team that scored 30-plus points against Mississippi State, follow that up with 40-plus points against South Carolina. Another game with JT Daniels, the starting quarterback, to see just how much better this Georgia offense can be. And maybe as a part of that, the balance of the dogs between running, something we saw a lot of against the Gamecocks, and throwing, something we saw a lot of against Mississippi State. Exactly what is Kirby Smart looking for, though, when it comes to the balance of the offense, and exactly what is the stated goal as you go into the game against Vanderbilt? Smart did talk some more about that this week. This is what Kirby said about his offense.
I don't balance that. I think you take what they give you and you do what you want. There's something to be said for both of those comments. I mean, do what you want to do. Well, what do you want to do? I want to score points. Do you care how? No, I don't really care how. I mean, as long as we can run the ball, control the line of scrimmage, not turn it over, throw the ball downfield, I'm very pleased with all those things. I do think that being explosive is much more important than being balanced. And explosive can be done a lot of different ways. I can give you an example of 5 different offenses in college football that do it different ways, and they do it and they score points. So the be-all and end-all there is, are you scoring points?
And that's the bottom line for me as well. When you want to investigate what Georgia's going to do on Saturday, I think it can be just as simple as that. Is Georgia scoring points? Are they putting 30-plus points on the board 3 weeks in a row? Do they go back-to-back games with 40-plus points on Saturday? How they get it done ultimately right now might not matter as much as the fact they do get it done to that kind of measurable clip, because early in the season, for the most part, Georgia wasn't finding those 30s very frequently. And certainly in 2019 against SEC opponents, 30-point games were very hard to come by. It was a regular feature of the team in 2017, 2018, not quite so much true as of late, but maybe now coming back true again once again. And so we'll certainly see how that goes on Saturday. I'll also mention one more thing before we wrap things up today. As Mike Griffith reported at DogNation.com yesterday, looks like Georgia will be without center Trey Hill on Saturday. Check out this week's edition of the Dog Nation Happy Hour presented by Classic City Lager. John Stinchcomb goes into some detail about what Georgia will now do as it replaces Trey Hill at center. Warren Erickson likely stepping in. Follow that with John Stinchcomb. Also, a busy day of coverage for us tomorrow on all the Dog Nation video channels. Georgia versus Vanderbilt pregame, postgame, everything else in between. We'll talk to you then. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday for Dog Nation Daily, presented by Kroger. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. You know, R.S. Andrews, it's appropriate for me to say this as I broadcast live from my home. They can keep you going with all your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, electric needs. In other words, they keep you comfortable inside your home because of all the systems that they know how to fix when they're broken and make sure they're working the way they're supposed to. So you can trust R.S. Andrews for all of that. My invitation to you is to check them out online at rsandrews.com. All right, I'm going to run through just a couple of comments today because we did some comments during the Jeff interview a little earlier. So just a few comments for us, and then I'll let you get going on your weekend. And we got some busy stuff coming up at Dog Nation here today as well. Let me go to Facebook first. I'm pretty sure I started on YouTube yesterday. My memory's not always great. Robert A. Smith says, just not get JT Daniels injured. Yeah, it was interesting to hear JT, and I played the audio for you yesterday on the Marty and McGee interview, saying that he's not quite 100% right now, but he's close to 100%. It's one of the reasons why I want more of JT Daniels in the field the next couple of games to give us a chance to make sure that he continues to get the seasoning that he needs. He continues to get the practice and the reps that he needs so they can be the most effective quarterback possible. And as I'm saying that, my phone just died. So I don't ever do this. Let me see if I can pull these up on Facebook while I'm also here on Zoom. Let's see how this goes. Is this going to work? Let's try this. All right, over here on the Facebook side of things on my laptop, unprecedented here to use this while I'm also on Zoom. Oh goodness, how's this going to go here? All right, hold on one second. I don't think this is going to work. All right, so we may have to end early today. I have my phone has died, and I don't have any ability to read any comments here. So let me let you guys get ready to enjoy your weekend. And I certainly hope that you have a great time. Obviously, we'll have plenty more comments on Monday, getting ready for just a really big weekend all the way around of Georgia versus Vanderbilt, seeing what Georgia does, getting closer to the start of the early signing period. Sorry for the end of the lack of comments right now. We were able to take a bunch a little earlier in the show. Hope you all have a great weekend, and I'll look forward to seeing you back here again on Monday for Dog Nation Daily, presented by Kroger. We'll talk to you then, everybody.